Am I the a-hole? I didn't attend my son's wedding. I instead spent the evening with his ex-wife. Quick backstory. After graduating high school, my son moved 3 states away for college. Then at 19, he married a girl he met. I tried convincing him to wait because I personally felt he was too immature. But they both dropped out and moved back here to his hometown. At 20, they had their first child, a beautiful little girl. 16 months later, my daughter-in-law gave birth to their second child, a little boy. After the first baby, my wife and I noticed our daughter-in-law wasn't happy. We both thought it was PPD related. Just after the second arrived, my son and his wife separated. She would bring the kids over for a visit. It was then she began unloading on us. I know there's 2 sides to every story, but considering I know my son, I believed her. I sat my son down numerous times to speak with him regarding his marriage, and he refused to take responsibility, blamed her for everything even when I directly pointed out where he was the sole problem. They got into counseling. For a year, things were okay on the surface, but eventually our daughter-in-law filed for divorce. My son 3 days later was on Facebook announcing his new girlfriend. A month later, they were engaged. My son had forced his then-wife to become a permanent stay-at-home mom at the birth of their first child. She, of course, had no other family or friends here, and she knew no one aside from us. She had nowhere to go with 2 small children, so unbeknownst to our son, my wife and I helped her financially and got her an apartment. Before the divorce was even finalized, we received a wedding invitation. I made it clear to my son that I would not be attending and they would not have my blessing. His mother told him she would see to it that I would attend, but I stayed consistent in my decision. I also asked him not to bring his fiancée around our house out of respect for the mother of his children. The wedding happened on February 11, and the night before, my wife gave me the final push. I still did not attend. Our daughter also did not attend for the same reasons. My wife picked up our grandkids, got them dressed, and attended the wedding, while my daughter and I decided to spend the evening with his ex. I couldn't imagine her sitting alone while her kids attended their father's wedding. She was taken aback that I didn't end up attending his wedding. We took her out to distract her mind. I just wanted her to know she'll always be considered family to us. My daughter also made a joke they can drop the in-law status and just be sisters now. She was very tearfully grateful, and I realized just how badly she needed our support, and specifically on that night. The next morning, my son called to tell me how much of a horrible father I am for not attending his wedding. Few days later, he caught wind that I spent the wedding evening with his ex, and that he said that was the ultimate form of betrayal. And further, myself and his sister would have to earn a relationship with him on his terms only. Now for the top comments. Not the a-hole. Our daughter-in-law filed for divorce. My son 3 days later was on Facebook announcing his new girlfriend. A month later, they were engaged. Ew. The best children are the ones you choose. My ex posted about his new girlfriend on Facebook before I had the chance to file. But we separated because of his cheating. It's nice that he was fired soon after, and now the affair partner is financially supporting him. Not the a-hole. This is funny. Do you have to earn a relationship on his terms? I think he needs to check his offering. He's way overvaluing what he brings to the table. Honestly though, why would anyone care to earn a relationship with someone who clearly puts no value on the relationships he already had? He didn't care when Opie said from the get-go he wouldn't attend, because he just assumed he would get his way in the end. The only relationship this guy values is the relationship with that guy in the mirror. Opie, not the a-hole. Not the a-hole. It sounds like you're a reasonable parent who acknowledges when your kid is being an idiot. I don't see anything wrong with you choosing to support the mother of your grandchildren, who he seems to have left in a bad spot. Too many parents don't want to hold their children accountable. I'm glad this father does. My father was abusive, and his parents always sided with him and told me to just deal with it. Whenever he did something, they just swept it under the rug. They didn't want to believe their son could be such an a-hole, despite seeing him blow up themselves. So they would rather live in denial. Next story. Am I the a-hole for taking legal action against my sister-in-law for damage she did to my dad's property? My 24 female dad is pretty well off and owns multiple properties in both the country I live in as well as back in his home country. Because of this, and the fact that my husband and I both have good careers, my sister-in-law has always had a snobby attitude towards us and my side of the family, and tries to mooch off of us at any chance she gets. When we go out to eat with my husband's side of the family, we're expected to pay. Christmas and birthday, his side of the family expects good gifts, etc. His sister is currently on her third marriage and has 3 children, all under the age of 10. Her and her husband were looking for a place to host their wedding and approached me about using one of my dad's properties to host it. I was very hesitant at first to help her because of the treatment she has given me in the past, but it's my dad's property after all, so I contacted him to ask him about it. He said it's my call, but told me to 1. Have them sign some type of agreement stating that if any damage is done to the house, they are liable. 2. They are going to be charged a reasonable fee to use the house. We both agreed on the $1,500, which I believe is very reasonable considering this is a massive house. I told sister-in-law and her husband about this. They asked about a family discount, and I told them this was a family discount, and take it or leave it. They signed the agreement and paid. Fast forward 2 days after the wedding, I went over to the house. House is a complete mess. Bed sheets are stained, a vase destroyed, alcohol bottles floating in the pool, etc. I contact my dad to tell him. He tells me to assess the damage and see how much it is. It was around $1,000 worth of damage. My dad contacts my sister-in-law himself and explains to her the damage and what she owes him. She loses her mind and starts going off about how this is BS. We're family. She shouldn't even be charged in the first place. We're so well off we can happily afford to pay for the damages. If she gives him that money, they won't be able to afford to go on a honeymoon, etc., etc. She then calls me up to harass me and starts calling me a witch who thinks she's too good for everyone and says, it's a wedding, what do you expect? Sorry, my people know how to have a good time. My dad gives her 30 days to pay and she was notified about this. 30 days comes and no payment. So my dad got his lawyer to contact sister-in-law explaining how she's being taken to court for not paying. Her and my mother-in-law have been contacting my husband nonstop, trying to get him to get her the money. He refuses because he agrees that what she did was irresponsible and wrong. I had to block mother-in-law and sister-in-law after they sent me nasty messages and even try to show up at my house to talk to me. I feel bad that my husband's relationship with his mom and sister is going to be ruined over $1,000. But I feel like what she did was wrong and she wasn't even sorry about it. Edit. I should also add that my sister-in-law and her husband were given a key to the house to use it and lock it up when they were leaving it. The key was returned to me at my house. The next day, I went over to the house, which is when I found the damage. So they left the house in the condition for me to see with no care in the world. Not the a-hole. Your sister-in-law fooled around and she found out. Good life lesson for her. Sucks for your husband, but it also shows him how little regard his family has for him. Yep, if sister-in-law had rented a public venue, would she expect them not to come after her if she left it in this condition? It makes it even worse that it was family. They were kind enough to let her use it at a heavily discounted rate, and she had so little respect for them that she left it trashed. She deserves everything she's getting right now. She'd probably expect OP's family to pay for damages to a different venue too. Not the a-hole. Honestly, this might be quite a blessing for your husband. His mother and sister are horrible people. They caused actual damages and have insulted you, your father and your husband, for simply asking them to be responsible for themselves. If they choose to step out of his life over this, so much the better. I'd like an update in the future. Not the a-hole. The thing I'm wondering is that the sister-in-law didn't even invite the OP or her dad to this wedding? That's rude in itself. Next story. Am I the a-hole for moving out and causing my engaged roommates to struggle with paying for the wedding? I, 32, female, have known Kara, 32, female, since 1995. In November 2021, she asked me to move in with her fiancé male 30 and her brother male 40. My apartment wanted to raise my rent and they were saving for a wedding, so moving in would help each other out. I wasn't on a lease because the landlord would probably up the rent. I noticed after moving in that they'd spent their money on things they never really used. Purses, shoes, random fandom decor, and they would go out to eat a lot. Out-of-state vacations were every 2 to 3 months. I wasn't allowed to have people over. 3 months in, I wanted to bring over my boyfriend at a time and it caused a huge argument. After we broke up, she was adamant that no one else was allowed to come over. She would go in my room when I wasn't there. In June, she started to call it her room, that I was renting so she can do whatever she wants. I changed the lock on the door without telling her and closed the door just to see what would happen. I came home to the door being open and the frame being cracked because I must have accidentally locked myself out. In July, the water heater blew up and caused a flood. Within the next few days, everyone got sick. When I asked her to get it checked for mold, she refused. Luckily, she didn't have to pay anything because the landlord covered fixing the water heater. She was relieved that she could still go on her California vacation, but everyone in the house kept getting sick every couple of weeks. I purposely avoided the house so it didn't affect me quite as much as it used to when I was constantly there. In November 2022, I came home and found black mold literally growing on the bathroom ceiling in different spots. I confronted her about it multiple times and she said it's calcium buildup. In December, they finally picked out a wedding date and venue. His parents told them that instead of paying for the whole thing like they originally said they would only be paying for half because she wanted an elegant look. Her parents are both deceased, so it's up to the couple to pay for the other half. My friend started freaking out because they hadn't saved the entire year. In early January, my brother's divorce was finalized and he got a house. He asked me if I'd like to rent out a room as he'd rarely be home and is charging me next to nothing. It's honestly an offer I couldn't refuse. So I took them out to eat in public and told them I paid them for February's rent, even though I had my stuff moved out before the end of January. They were shocked and went silent until last week when I was flooded with texts. Apparently, I'm completely screwing them over. They said they're going to change the venue and she might have to return her $1,500 dress. They wanted me to know about how badly I screwed them over. She asked if I could spot her some money every now and then to help make up for my betrayal. But to be honest, I'm over this friendship. Am I the a-hole? Now for the top comments. Nope, not the a-hole. Clearly and unequivocally. It's not even just a money issue, it's a full and toxic environment issue, literally and figuratively. God, they sound exhausting. There was nothing reasonable or justifiable about how they treated Opie, like a clueless child versus a grown adult for Pete's sake. Glad she got the hell out of there. Not the a-hole, you should have moved out sooner. Yeah, that February rant was totally unnecessary in this context, because Kara's rude and selfish and controlling AF. Absolutely not the a-hole. There was mold in the apartment that your so-called friend was refusing to take care of. Plus, you weren't allowed to have guests and your privacy wasn't being respected. Moving out was a smart thing to do. It's clear that Kara only asked you to move in with her so she could use your rent to live a more comfortable lifestyle. Think about it. If they asked you to move in so they could save up for their wedding, why did they freak out when they learned his parents were only going to pay half the costs? After a year of having a roommate, they should have had a good portion of money saved up. You don't owe her anything. She should have been more a responsible adult and a much better friend. It would probably be best to end a friendship. Last story. Am I the a-hole for buying my girlfriend's sister a car? About 4 years ago, my girlfriend and her younger sister had a huge falling out. I don't know what about because my girlfriend never went into any specifics, and that was before I even met her, but they haven't spoken to each other since. I've been with my girlfriend for 2 years. About a year ago, her sister reached out to me because she wanted me to persuade my girlfriend into meeting with her because she wanted to reconnect. But when I told my girlfriend, she said she never wants to see her. 2 weeks ago, her sister messaged me again and asked me if she could borrow $2,000 from me because she needed to buy a new car, and she said she'd pay me back monthly. I told her that I can't just borrow her money because I don't know her, and I don't know if she's actually gonna use it to buy a car. But I told her that if she found a car for sale she wants, I can go and see it with her and pay for it. So a couple days ago, I met up with her, and I paid just over $2,000 for a car. This was the first that I actually met her in person. I told her she could just pay me back whenever. I honestly just felt a bit sorry for her. I could tell she genuinely wants to reconnect with my girlfriend, but she just refuses. Her sister also didn't tell me any specifics about their falling out, but that it had to do with my girlfriend's old boyfriend, and how my girlfriend basically accused her of doing something she didn't do. I didn't press her for anything specific because I could tell she didn't want to talk about it. Afterwards, I told my girlfriend about it and she got furious at me. She said I shouldn't have bought her a car, and she claims I betrayed her trust by going behind her back. We argued about it for a while and, well, since then she barely speaks to me. But I honestly don't think I did anything wrong, especially since we don't share finances. So I spent my own money and not hers. So was I the a-hole? I don't know if ages are relevant here, but I'm 27, my girlfriend is 25, and her sister is 19. You're the a-hole. Boundaries, dude. You need a refresher. You, as a 27-year-old man, should not be going behind your girlfriend's back and contacting her estranged teen sister, let alone buying her a car. Creepy, inappropriate, and downright weird as hell. It is a huge red flag, and I would just dump such a boyfriend. Apparently, you learned that it had something to do with a boy, and you honestly ask if you are the a-hole? This just screams that OP is the kind of person to say family's family no matter what they've done to you. Her sister also didn't tell me any specifics about their falling out, but that it had to do with my girlfriend's old boyfriend and how my girlfriend basically accused her of doing something she didn't do. If this is your first time meeting her, how do you even know she didn't do whatever she's been accused of? Why would you believe the sister you've never met over your own partner? It is honestly a terrible idea to drop $2,000 for a stranger because they are vaguely pseudo-family, even before you get the technically legal teenager of your preferred gender or girlfriend's estranged sister. At that point, whether or not she did what girlfriend accused her of is an interesting but immaterial question. You're the a-hole, but can I have a car too? You know me just as well, and I really want one. I can provide a sob story too if that helps. I am also an estranged sibling of your girlfriend. I also need $2,000 for a car. DM me for details. Only if you answer 3 questions first. Am I the a-hole for telling my dad he needs to babysit his own children for once? So I'm 15 female, I'm the second oldest child out of 5. My older brother has moved out and so it's me, my 2 younger brothers, one's 12, one's 4, and my younger sister, 3. When my mom was pregnant with my sister, I would be happy to look after my younger brother because I understood it was hard on my parents at the time. But this eventually became a regular thing, that I would babysit my brother and then when my sister was born, I would also have to babysit her. It wasn't too bad at first until my mom took up some hobbies. She would go to fitness classes 3 days or 4 days a week for an hour in the evening. And so my parents got into the routine that whenever my mom went to a class, I would have to babysit my siblings. Which was extremely hard as I'm only a young teenage girl and I cannot cope with a baby and a toddler on my own. Fast forward to present time where this is still going on, and although it's easier because I don't have to deal with a baby anymore, it's still hard. And now whenever my mom goes to her class, my dad will give some excuse as to why he has to go into the garden or garage to avoid looking after my siblings. So today it happened again, I was looking after my siblings. I went to the toilets because I needed to go, and then I hear my dad come in and start screaming my name. I come out the bathroom to see my dad standing outside my brother's bedroom door and my little brother holding deodorant. My dad then begins to shout at me telling me I'm lazy and never do anything, and that I can't even look after my own brother. For context, my younger brother had taken the deodorant and sprayed it everywhere. And at this point, I had enough. So I turned to my dad and said, well, maybe this wouldn't have happened if you would just look after your own children for once. Then my mom came home, and my dad proceeded to blame everything on me, that I was being bratty and lazy. So, am I the a-hole? Not the a-hole. Parents aren't babysitters. They're parents. They are neglecting the responsibility of being a parent and passing it off on the daughter. This isn't uncommon. I'm sorry. The title should be read as, Am I the a-hole for telling my dad he needs to parent his own children for once? Not the a-hole. You had to use the bathroom. You're telling me back when you were a toddler and your brother was a baby that they didn't leave you for just a little bit to go answer the call of nature? I'd like to know what your mother thinks of the fact that your father does nothing but tell you to babysit his children. What happened next in the story? Did your mother believe him or you? My mom and dad have a rocky relationship. My mom does believe me. However, she won't bring this up with my dad to avoid arguments. It's extremely frustrating because I would like it to be addressed to my dad properly by my mom, but only ever is when they are having a drunk argument and using me as a piggy in the middle to try prove points. And by morning, they forget almost all the arguments anyways. That's an extremely abusive behavior. Please get some help. It's not your responsibility to take care of your siblings, nor fix your parents' relationships. Not today, Hall. Do you know your mom's schedule for when she's going to classes? Start leaving shortly before she leaves. It's one thing asking you to watch them when they're both at work or for occasional date night, but multiple times a week when dad is in fact home is horrible. You're their child, not their live-in nanny. Not today, Hall. Parentification is mistreatment. This is why some kids cut their parents off at 18 and never want children of their own. I actually relate to this. I don't really want children of my own. I have decided to move to England and live with my grandparents for college. If I do ever have kids, I will only at most have 2, and they will be close in age. I know it sounds strange to have all this planned out at this age, but I'm really confident about my feelings towards my future. Next story. Am I the a-hole if I disengage from stepkids? My husband has 2 kids in their mid to upper teens. These kids do not like me and see me as the reason their parents will not reconcile at any point. I was not the other woman, as my husband and his ex were divorced 4 years before he and I met. These kiddos dislike me because I'm with their dad, and they feel he should either be with their mom or alone and unhappy. I have tried for years to build a relationship and find shared interests with them, but it has gone and continues to go nowhere. I have included them in everything I can, and planned stuff and outings I know they'd enjoy for us to spend time together and bond. Here's an example. They like scavenger hunts. Husband invites them to come over for a scavenger hunt at the zoo, and they're excited about it. Then he tells them I'm the one who planned it for them, and suddenly they no longer have interest, and that scavenger hunts are boring and for losers. Example 2. I planned and decorated and made the cake for the younger one's birthday. Kiddo thought it was great until her dad mentioned how much work I put into her party. After that, she just wanted the party to end and complained how everything was awful and nothing was what she wanted. Example 3. I got them beautiful Pandora bracelets they wanted for Christmas, but because they were for me, they got thrown to the side and not worn because nobody likes Pandora anymore. Example 4. The kids have told me in no uncertain terms the entire reason they hate me is because I'm with their dad, and that's unforgivable to them. That's just a few examples, but I have so many others, and to be honest, it's hard to take. When the kids are here, they make a point to not speak to me, or if they do, it's very short and they're disrespectful. They refuse to say thank you to me. And yes, my husband gets on them about it, but then they scream and cry that they want to go home and they hate both of us. Am I the a-hole if I disengage from them? Not permanently, but to take time to focus on my mental health. Not the a-hole. Your stepchildren aren't interested in having a relationship with you. You've tried. They are not receptive. Go about your business. Be cordial, but if they don't appreciate your efforts, there is no need to go all out. They live in a fantasy where they believe that if it weren't for you, their parents would be together again. It really sounds as if their mom feeds this fantasy. My cousins and aunts were exactly the same, and it created for a horrible relationship with their father and stepmom even though they got together years later too. The mom does. A few years ago, we all went to a water park resort. Husband, me, stepkids, and my kids. And the mom pulled this whole thing about, if I wasn't around, it could have been them going as a family. But since I'm in the picture, that's never going to happen and they'll never be a real family again. Not the a-hole. They obviously don't want you to put effort into a relationship with them, so don't do it. Don't do anything to spite the kids, but don't do anything extra. Not the a-hole depending on what you mean by disengage. I think it's absolutely appropriate for you to take a step back from the relationship, as it is clearly bringing you great stress and upset to the detriment of your mental health. Still be present, kind, and engage with them where appropriate, but stop going out of your way to plan, bake, and buy for them. Perhaps when they've grown up a bit, they will have a change of heart and be more accepting of you as their family. Perhaps not. But right now, they've made their thoughts and feelings clear, and I think it's right for you to acknowledge that, and do what you need to do to remain happy. Wishing you the very best of luck. Info. Does your husband see this behavior from them? Does he do anything to address it? He should at the very least be supporting you. How does he feel about his children treating you this way? He is not happy, and had talked to them several times, but the end is the same. They don't care how they treat me and will never like me no matter what. Based on your reply, you are not the a-hole. It sounds like you are making very thoughtful efforts to show them that you care, and they are rebuffing you at every turn. At this point, you need to take care of yourself. You aren't so much backing away from the daughters, as you are respecting their wishes that you are not involved with them. I'm sorry that this is such a tough situation, though it's good to see that your husband truly sees what's happening. Next story is titled, Am I the a-hole for shutting down my parents after they brought up a crappy story at my brother's graduation? I'm 5 years older than my brother. When he was born, I wasn't very happy with him and tried to give him away many times. I even tried to run away to my uncle's house because I didn't want to share the house with him. It took about a year for me to adapt, and when I did, I loved him and I loved being his older sibling. But my parents loved to talk about the first year of his life and how I reacted to him. They bring it up at Christmas, birthdays, family weddings, etc. And it annoys me and hurts my brother, which annoys me even more. He's sensitive to the fact that while we're great now, I disliked him being born so much I wanted to give him away, and tried to run away when he wasn't sent away. I get why he feels that way too. Anyway, he graduated high school this summer, and we had a small thing at home with his girlfriend's family, my husband's family, and our family. And at this graduation party, our parents proceeded to go into the stories again. Only this time they brought up the two worst ones. The time I actually took him outside while my parents weren't looking and asked a random neighbor to take him. And the time I actually left our home and made it all the way to my uncle's because I didn't want to live with him anymore. My parents find both of these stories hilarious and laughed their butts off, while my brother looked so upset and I was trying to keep it cool. I have apologized many times to him at any time he knew to a stories mentioned. But this time, I couldn't keep my anger in check, and snapped. I asked them why they felt the need to bring them up still, that it hurts my brother every damn time, and what is the point? Is it to punish me? Do they really think it's funny that I try to give my brother away multiple times and actually run away from home? Did they really think other people wanted to hear it? My brother ended up coming to stay with me and my husband. Our parents said I was an a-hole for blowing up at them like that. Am I the a-hole? Now for the comments. Not the a-hole. Sometimes parents are absolutely clueless and don't understand their kids are embarrassed and hurt from the old stories they share. Draw up a contract that says they will never bring it up again and make them sign it. Maybe they'll understand then. Or just start not inviting them to events and not hiding it. I feel like little brother moving out to live with big sister may help reinforce it without making a contract which the parents will probably just laugh at. Not the a-hole. If your parents are aware of what it means to you and they still go around telling these stories, they must know it doesn't like it and it can be very upsetting to hear. Putting social approval above your children makes your parents a-holes. It's weird too, because I don't know how many people would readily admit they didn't notice their 5-year-old was missing for a whole 30 minutes, which is how long it took me to get to my uncle and for him to call me. Info. Have you ever told your parents how you feel about all this? Reaction was perhaps a bit strong if not. Either way though, not the a-hole. Yeah, when I got married it came up twice directly. I even stopped them making a speech because I didn't want that broadcast at my wedding. They always find a way to tell the worst ones, or go into the most detail when it's public. Last story is titled, Am I the a-hole for telling my biological mother that my best friend's mother is more of a parent than she'll ever be? I, 18 female, met my best friend Grace, 18 female, in 3rd grade. My mother had never filled out my free lunch form, and it defaulted to having to pay. No matter how many times I told my mother she never gave me lunch money, packed a lunch, or filled out a form. Grace noticed I wasn't eating, or would always have to get a cereal and milk for lunch. She started offering me her fruit snacks and juice and saying she didn't want them. After a few weeks, I guess she told her mom, and she would suddenly have 2 of everything, and would give the extra to me. When Grace's birthday came around, her parents threw her a party and I was invited. My mother needed a break and decided that a party plus sleepover was the perfect time. Grace's mom, Lily, 39 female, was really nice. It was kind of off-putting at first. My mother was/is very mean and has been in my entire life. It wasn't even a sleepover, but my mother had dropped me off and disappeared, so Lily let me stay the weekend. Grace and I became really close after that. We were basically inseparable, even if we were in different classes. My mother was missing in action, and she didn't care where I was half the time. Especially as I entered middle and high school. Lily and Grace were really close. I was jealous as a kid, but Lily was always very welcoming to me. Lily, Grace, and I would go shopping together. She would buy everything for me and wouldn't allow me to complain. She got me my first bras and menstrual products. She would always buy me birthday presents, and when I was younger, she would also do my hair. My mom didn't really buy me clothes, but Lily always did. That or Grace would have clothes she didn't want anymore. Then my mom kicked me out when I was 16. I didn't want Lily to call CPS because every time they were contacted, they did nothing but send me back because my mother provided the bare necessities. So I moved in with Grace and her family. They had a spare room that they turned into a bedroom for me, and I've been living here ever since. Anyways, Grace and I graduated a few weeks ago. I guess my mother heard because she showed up at the graduation and started bragging about how proud of me she was. She kept saying she had gotten me to where I am today, even though I hadn't spoken to her since she had kicked me out. I started getting really pissed. I didn't understand how she could just show up out of the blue like that and started claiming anything about me. She wouldn't stop no matter how many times I told her to, so I left with Grace's family. I texted her afterwards saying she was never a mother to me, and that Lily was the mother I wanted and needed. She screenshotted and sent it around. Then my grandparents and aunts started messaging me, calling me an a-hole for saying what I did. They kept telling me that she struggled with being a parent. I know my mother had a rough upbringing herself, and they keep bringing that up. Now I'm starting to feel bad. Maybe I just shouldn't have said anything at all. Am I the a-hole? Not the a-hole. She wasn't a mom, and still isn't. No need for you to be upset that the rest of the family can't see her like you do. Tell the rest of your parents, and send a screenshot of your room at the new place too, and tell them you got kicked out and lived there since then, and everything Lily did for you. And if they don't support you or anything at all, go low contact or no contact because they don't care about you. I mean, she's right. She did get you where you are today. Her crappy parenting drove you into another family that supported you and loved you and cared for you. So she's not wrong, but she is going about it the wrong way. Not an a-hole for your honesty. And if the words of a random internet stranger mean anything to you, I'm impressed by you for turning a bad situation into a good one. Your mom showed her true colors and you turned the mirror. It's not your fault she didn't like what it showed. Just because I survived you doesn't mean you did a good job. You mentioned your mother had a rough upbringing herself. Would this, by chance, be the same people who are currently calling you an a-hole? Her parents and her sister? If they did such a wonderful job, how on earth are they justified in commenting at all? Their opinion is irrelevant. Parenting is actions, not biology. Some people just aren't cut out for it. Fortunately, you have a wonderful example of a caring parent. It just doesn't happen to be your biological mother. Treasure your choice, Mom. So they know she struggled, but didn't help? Didn't buy food or clothes, didn't babysit or pitch in to give her a break. Ignored the fact Opie lived at a friend's home for years and didn't open their home to her. They either watched all of this happen and turned a blind eye, or they didn't care enough to check in with Opie. Either way, they have no business commenting. Am I the a-hole for telling my kid the real reason me and her father split? So, me and my ex-husband split about a year ago. He had been cheating for over half the amounts of years we had been together, and I caught him in bed with a man and a woman. He was bisexual. I divorced him soon after, despite all the pleading, and we went our separate ways. I've tried to briefly explain without outing him to my daughter, 15 female, why we are splitting. My intention was never to turn her away from her dad or make her hate him. We had originally stated that we would try to keep this as brief and shelter our daughter from this harsh time as much as possible. But lately, she has been very hateful and disrespectful towards me, and for the longest time I couldn't understand why. Until she had gotten into a fit and told me that I ruined her life, and if I just kept my legs closed, she would have still had her family back together. This shocked me. At first I was angry, but then I was confused as to where she got this information from. I'd asked her before, and she said that she wasn't going to talk to me when I was the one who ruined her life. I called her father and asked him if he knew anything about this, and if he had told anyone I was the one who screwed up. But he dismissed everything and said he had no clue where she had gotten that information from. Now I was really confused, and back to angry that she said this to me, but I chose to wait until I knew what was going on. I tried talking to her multiple times, but she continued to shut me down and say that I ruined her life. I'm a terrible mom, that I chose sex over her family, and I'm the only one to blame for not having a mom and dad together. I reached out to all family and friends to see if they had said anything that would lead to this as well. Now, I'm not proud of this, but I saw a message come up on my daughter's phone and I picked at it. The message read, "I know, sweetie, just 3 more days," and it was from her dad. I opened the phone to see tons of messages of them two going back and forth, with her telling him that she was sick of being here. She didn't want to be near me after I did that. She couldn't believe I would cheat. She's disgusted by me. And her father just agreed and consoled her. I asked him multiple times if he knew anything about her behavior, and he said no, and he put the blame on me for no reason. So I called him once again after that and messaged him about it when he didn't respond and got left on read. So I sat my daughter down and told her that I know she's angry at me and that I tried to shelter her from this and keep her as far away from this as possible, but I won't be held accountable for actions that weren't mine. I left any and all questions that I couldn't say without her perspective out. She was shocked and apologized for her behavior to me. This wasn't some petty revenge to get back at him, but I can't have my relationship with hers ruined either. I'm now getting blasted by all of my family and his for doing this. So am I the a-hole? Now for the top comments. Not the a-hole. And you should screenshot and keep those messages of him turning her against you. That is illegal in many places, as is parental alienation. Also, keep any messages where he admitted he was the one who cheated and where you agreed to not discuss it with her. Next, I'd consult a lawyer in case it takes this farther. Oh man, I actually get furious when the cheaters say their partner cheated and try to get their kids to hate the faithful parent. He's so trash he's not worth anything. Sweetie, just 3 more days. Instant vomit. My ex-husband did this, also claimed I was the dangerous one. I had planned not to tell my son anything until he was an adult or at least late teens. I had planned to go with, sometimes, no matter how hard people try, it's best for them not to be together. This is what's best for us and you, because we couldn't live together lovingly and respectfully. But when my son came home with all of what happened turned around on me, I was cornered into sharing the truth. When I felt conflicted about what to believe, I had him use his critical thinking skills. For example, X is much stronger than I am, and I'm not physically capable of doing any of what he had done to me, and promised I wouldn't be upset with him if he didn't believe me. He thought through the facts and came to the correct conclusion. Not the a-hole honestly reads as the appropriate and good choice in a super cruddy situation. His manipulating and lying to get himself seen in the best light, after being the one to ruin things, mark him as one to not really sympathize with. She already was no longer being sheltered from it when you explain things. And at that point, knowing what really went on is just the best position to be in. I hope the family also have the full story too. Yeah, me too. But as for the family, I'm not sure what they do or don't know. Some of it is his family too, so I can't say much to them. Are you able to talk to them about it to make sure they know what really happened? Or like draft some kind of written account of what happened on your side as neutrally but true as possible? If he is going behind your back to turn your daughter against you, it wouldn't be surprising if it extended further out. Heck, sometimes just being the first to paint a messy situation is grounds to bend it a good bit in your own favor, and people take advantage of that sometimes. I could, but that's a lot of people, and very defined and argumentative people from my experience. So I'm just trying to take whatever energy I have to argue with them about it, because I know they won't believe me, or they will have an issue with something. Do you have proof he cheated? Because you're going to need it. You're going to drag your daughter into this mess. You need to talk to your lawyer ASAP. Not the a-hole. He's on a smear campaign against you, so you need all the proof you can get. I have the messages, and proof of all the money he spent on hotel with other people that he's admitted to. I'm not sure where this will go as of now. Hopefully I won't need it. Next story. Am I the a-hole for not allowing my boyfriend to come with me on a trip since he was about to ask his parents to pay for all expenses? My 20 female friends from uni and I have been planning to go on a trip next March since the beginning of this year. Since 2 of my friends are bringing their partners along with them, I've asked my boyfriend 19 male if he wanted to come as well, under the condition that he earned the money himself to cover his expenses, including plane tickets and accommodations, which had come to be around 5,000 Canadian dollars. I made this request months ago because I knew he was going to ask his parents for the money to cover the expenses, which they had always given him. Like when his brother asked for $3,000 for a gaming setup and when he asked for $2,000 so he could have a TV in his room. His family isn't super wealthy, but they're well-to-do, and his mom has tried to ask him to try and get a part-time job during school breaks, to which he has always said he'll try, but ended up never getting one. I grew up in a household where we often had to get by, and thus has worked/been working multiple part-time jobs since I was 16, and have been trying to urge him to get a job with his mother. A couple of days ago, he told me he wants to go on a trip with me, which shocked me, as I questioned how he was going to raise $5,000, since we still have classes and semester break doesn't start till late Feb. And he told me he asked his parents, and they agreed to help pay for his expenses. I told him no, I would not be allowing him to go on the trip with me, and refused to share our itinerary document with him, since I made it clear I didn't want his parents to pay for his expenses, and established that he would have to earn his keep. But he told me that this was something I should have zero say over, since I was never in charge of how his parents' money. We had a fight over this, and he called me a controlling, manipulative freak. Before ranting to my friends' partners who were going on this trip with us, we're all part of the same friend group. They all agreed I was a little out of line and should have no say over how he raised the funds needed. I don't want to rant to my other friends about this, since I don't want them to think badly of me or my boyfriend. But it really made me confused, as I have no clue if I'm the one at fault here. Am I the a-hole? Everyone sucks here. Your boyfriend has obvious entitlement issues. You're the a-hole because you're leveraging a vacation to make a point and police your boyfriend's behavior. If his lack of job bothers you, break up. But don't be in a relationship and then humiliate and exclude somebody into becoming the person you actually want to date. Is Opie's mother not a healthy relationship dynamic at all? He acts like he needs a mother. I think Opie was smart. She now knows how lazy and entitled he is, and what a poor life partner he would make. I'm going with you're the a-hole. Not because you insisted on him paying for himself, as it sounds like self-sufficiency is important to you, but because after all these months of knowing the kind of person he is, you were still dating him. If self-sufficiency isn't enough to go on the trip, it's not enough to be a boyfriend. It sounds like you are trying to fix him. Stop that and move on to other guys who aren't broken. If you don't want to date an entitled lazy guy, break up with him. Maybe life will be different for him after school, but it's a hard thing to change while in school full-time. Also, a girlfriend trying to train a boyfriend into being self-sufficient is not the foundation of a relationship. He'll do it or he won't. This trip isn't the mechanism to make it happen. Entitled and lazy? He's 19, goes to college, and his parents are well off. Stop judging men based on the value they bring like they're some cash cows. He's a kid, for Pete's sake. Next story. Am I the a-hole for not wanting my husband to go to his ex's funeral? I'll admit I'm biased right off the bat. I couldn't stand her. I call her his ex to myself and others. He called her his friend. We're all in our early 40s and she died recently of aneurysm. I've been with him 10 years now, but he'd known her for 20 plus. The way he tells it is that they were friends in college, decided to date, got married, then realized they weren't a great couple and decided to just be friends. All that happened years before I met him. He was clear early on that she was important. A couple months into dating, it came up that his friend was actually his ex-wife. He explained the above to me, saying she was one of his closest friends and that it was purely platonic. I expressed some discomfort at him being so close to an ex, and he told me, "That's fine. If you have a serious issue with it, let me know now and save us some time, because I'll choose her. I like you and all, but I've known her for over 12 years, and she's one of the most important people in my life. You'll have to be okay with that if you want us to be a thing." When we were engaged, I asked again. He gave me this perplexed look and asked, why would us getting married affect my friendships? I sucked it up and went along. I resented every moment of knowing her, especially when we had to be social. She understood some part of him I couldn't. Her husband was friends with mine as well, so it's not like I could use him as an angle. They'd have lunch with the ex, they'd go to their geeky movies, and whatever. The few times I brought it up, he said, "We had this conversation before. You had your chance to back out." She died after they had lunch the other day on the way to her car. He spent a bunch of time crying, but honestly, I was relieved. He was working with her husband on funeral planning when I told him, "You don't think you're going, do you?" My argument summed up. She's dead, so she's not a factor anymore. He doesn't get to use his "she's my friend" excuse, since she doesn't exist anymore. He had his cry for a couple days. He gets to be done with mourning her already. There's no need for him to go to her funeral, since I wouldn't want her at his. He was the angriest I've ever seen him when I told him that, replying that he'll be going no matter how I feel, and that he is willing to burn this to the freaking ground while holding up his wedding band. Besides you, she was the closest friend in my life. Him, her husband, and my sisters are calling me an insensitive a-hole over this, all saying that there's no romantic aspect to their relationship and that I'm heartless. Her husband went as far as calling me a ghoul for how I've reacted. I never felt their relationship was appropriate, and I hid that for years because I wanted to be with my husband. Now that she's gone, I don't feel I should have to hide it anymore and can speak freely. Am I the a-hole for just wanting him to be done with her and for him to not attend a funeral? Now for the top comments. You're the a-hole. When he divorces you, he probably won't have to explain his friendship with you to the next woman. Because, seriously, who'd want to stay friends with a woman who treated you like this? This. How heartless. I really hope they don't have any children together. So when he divorces OP, he can cut contact for good. If they had children, OP would have mentioned that after she got pregnant. She again tried to convince him that he needed to give up his friendship. If she doesn't exist anymore, why are you still so jealous of her? He can't even leave you for her now. So I think it's time you got past it. You're the a-hole. You can speak freely, and you can leave after finding out how heartless you actually are. Fair enough. I bet he will leave her over this anyway, even when the ex is dead. 'Cause damn did you prove to be a crappy person. Last story. Am I the a-hole for not wanting to give my adult stepdaughter her own room in our new home? I, 35 female, have been with my husband, 43 male James, for 3 years, married for 18 months. He has a 21-year-old daughter from his previous marriage, Jane. Jane and I get along well, but she was already away at college by the time her dad and I got serious, so we don't have a very close relationship. James and I are looking to purchase a home together because our current home is not going to work for me in the long term due to some disabilities. We've found a few we liked, and we were discussing our options when I referred to the third room as the guest room. James asked what I meant, because that would be Jane's room. This led to an argument between us, because I don't think Jane needs a dedicated bedroom in our new home. She's renting her own place now, with roommates year-round, no more student housing. And she still has her room at her mom's house. Of course, she's always welcome to visit, and if she were to ever need to move back in, then we could adjust at a time. But as it stands, she's an adult moving on to the adult portion of her life, and it seems silly to dedicate a room for her when she'll use it for 2 weeks out the year max. My husband is upset with me still, but I really don't think his position is that strong. She's a grown-up now. Am I the a-hole? Not the a-hole. As you say, she's a grown woman with her own grown-up home. Why on earth would she need her own room in your new house? Tell your husband to cut the umbilical cord. I wonder if this is less about the umbilical cord and more about feeling some competition with the ex who still has a room for her adult daughter. This is it. Mom is home because mom has a room for her. Not the a-hole. I'm astonished at people calling you an a-hole and suggesting your daughter should get to decorate a room in your house which she doesn't live at. If my father tried to allocate me a room like this, I'd find it deeply weird. Have you got any indication about her feelings on this madness? We haven't spoken to her about it, but she usually prefers staying at her mom's anyway, so I would guess that she won't be all that interested. Maybe this is your husband wanting to keep a door open, so to speak, but it feels like a futile and somewhat wasteful gesture. In any case, this sounds like an issue he needs to work through, which is creating a problem for you. Only advice that could be given is to stand firm but speak through it with him. No a-holes here, but I strongly suggest you call the third bedroom Jane's room, at least for now. Moving into a new home is stressful enough. Your husband doesn't want to feel like he's losing his old house and his daughter, which is exactly what he's going to worry about if you start using the Jane can just stay at her mom's house logic. If Jane had her own room in the old house, then for now let her have her own room in the new house. As time goes on, when everyone settles in and your husband realizes how sporadically Jane visits, then he'll be able to accept the fact that Jane is an adult and the new house isn't her home. Not because she never had a bedroom to begin with, but because Jane grew up into a woman with her own home and her own space. If you let the process happen naturally, it'll still happen, but you won't look like the mean stepmother pushing out his daughter. Am I the a-hole for leaving my house and leaving my mother and 4 siblings homeless? I, female just turned 18 last week, live with my mother and 4 siblings. Ages ranged 5 to 12, all different fathers. I've had a part-time job since I was 14. I was forced to watch the kids from a young age because my mother was either working or pregnant. She has no education, works whatever job she can find, and, well, she's an ignorant woman who never learns that having more children than you can feed is a terrible decision. And yes, termination is legal here, so it was her decision to keep them. I'm the only one with a relationship with my father. He never wanted children, but he's responsible enough to pay child support. This money is the family main income and my mother uses it to pay for rent and utilities and like half the groceries. I have a good relationship with my father, so he also covers my medical and educational expenses. On my birthday, He told me he'd like to keep supporting me by paying for my university and also asked if I'd be willing to live alone. He never liked the idea of my mother spending the money that was supposed to be only for me with all my siblings. I was delighted with the idea, as I've wanted to move out for a long time, as I hate my living situation and sharing with kids, and I don't get along with my siblings at all. When I told my mother I'm moving out, she saw red and called me an ungrateful brat. She tried to blame me for leaving them homeless. They'd be unable to pay rent by next month as my mother has no savings, and told me I should keep living with them because I should care about my siblings. I yelled at her that I've all lived off my father's money for 18 years, and that was enough. I don't want any contact with her anymore, and even less with those kids I don't even want to call my siblings. My friends are split about if I'm the a-hole. Some of them believe I should keep leeching off my father for the sake of my siblings, but honestly, I couldn't care less about them. I don't want to see my mother learn her lesson. And now for the top comments. That's an ugly situation. But no, not the a-hole. Your mom needs to be responsible and provide for her kids, not you. Her and the other fathers as well. Why the heck isn't she collecting child support for the other kids as well? Not to mention Opie's father is no longer required to give money now that Opie's an adult, but was still willing to. But also disgusted with his money being spent on the others as well. So if Opie stayed, they might still lose that money, which means the mom is in the same boat unless she gets Opie to give her all the money she makes from here on out. Not stay home. You are nothing more than a meal ticket and a source of babysitting. I'm a parent, and parents like your mother both enrage and disgust me. Honey, live your life for you. Leave and never look back. I would also make sure that she doesn't get contact information. The minute you start making real money, she'll show up with more kids. Get her hand out asking for you to support her life of stupidity. Congratulations on your freedom. Best of luck at school. This. Move out and cut all contact with those people. You do not owe them anything, and you do not have to keep toxic people in your life. Opie, what your mother is doing to you is called parentification. We see this a lot over r/child-free. It's what happens when idiot adults who should have never been allowed to breed refuse to learn their lesson. Instead of bucking up and taking responsibility for the children they created, the careless parent makes raising and safeguarding younger siblings the job of the oldest, and thus, theoretically, most mature/responsible. It is wrong, it is cruel, and it is child mistreatment. She freaked out because losing you would mean having to step up and be smart for a change. Without the designated pseudo-parent around, the real parent has no choice but to actually do their job. She made those kids, not you. She chose to keep them when options were available. She brought them into a life plagued by scarcity and hardship, mostly as a result of her own poor decisions. So those kids are her problem. Keeping them fed, clothed, and housed should be her burden to shoulder, not yours. Bottom line, not stay home. You're stuck in a quagmire, and it's doing everything it can to suck you down and crush you. If someone with a rope comes along and offers to pull you out, don't waste time worrying about the quicksand. The quicksand is not your concern. Say, yes please. Grab on with both hands, and don't look back. Next story. Am I the a-hole for telling my former stepmother that she has only herself to blame for me being my dad's favorite? I, 21 female, am technically an affair baby. More like a conceived through revenge baby. My dad, 56 male, married his high school sweetheart. My ex-stepmom, 56 female, because she was pregnant with a child that he thought was his, but was actually his former best friend's child. The second child was fathered by someone else. He raised my step-siblings, Amy, 36 female, and Ken, 33 male, thinking that they were his for years, until Ken got into an accident, exposing that it was impossible for Ken to have the blood type he did and be my dad's biological child. My dad was furious because he turned down a full ride to college to work 2 jobs because he felt like he needed to support his family. My stepmom begged for forgiveness and told him to think about how devastating the divorce would be to my step-siblings. For 3 weeks, my dad had disappeared without a trace, and no one could get a hold of him. The last thing he said to anyone was in a drunken voicemail that made people fear the worst. My dad was found, but in such a bad state that he had to be checked in, but refused contact with my stepmom and step-siblings while there. After a lot of pressure and begging, my dad agreed not to divorce my stepmom, but felt like he was owed something and decided that 2 could play at this game. And that's how it got here. After a DNA test, my dad was thrilled that I was around and made sure that I knew I was loved and a priority to him. So much so that he kinda neglected the first two children he raised. I didn't understand it at the time, but Amy and Ken resented me a lot because I was his real child, not my words, and I always came before them. My dad would always excuse it with the fact that I was so young, but he would outright ignore them a lot. My stepmom didn't really like me either, so my dad finally followed through with a divorce. He ended up getting the house, and when he died, he left it to me along with some family jewelry, the bulk of his savings, investments, and making me the sole beneficiary of his life insurance. He left Ken and Amy each $20,000. Amy and Ken were hurt, but I wasn't going to let them take out their anger on me again and be pressured to share. They threatened to sue, but my dad's lawyer assured me that I was in the clear. My ex-stepmom called me upset and demanded that I share everything equally, saying that a father shouldn't play favorite. Fed up with her BS, I told her that, "Lady, if you want to be mad that my dad had a favorite, then you need to blame yourself for sleeping around." It felt good, but my aunt feels like I was too harsh. Am I the a-hole? Edited to Ed. Saw this in a comment, so I wanted to be clear. 1. Amy's dad, who was my dad's best friend growing up, is dead. He died when Amy was a toddler, and was even my dad's best man. 2. Ken was the result of a one-night stand with a stranger, so he's going to have to submit his DNA into 23andMe or something to find out his paternal side. 3. My mom is still very much alive, and my dad left her something too. 4. I recognize that Amy and Ken were in an awful situation. I just don't really empathize because of how they treated me growing up, so I don't even care to have a relationship with them. My aunt, dad's sister, is the only reason why I would still see them, because she still wants a relationship with them. Edited to Ed too. Keep seeing a few more common things, so let me clarify some other stuff. 1. No, my mom didn't know my dad was married until after she was pregnant with me, and was angry at him for the longest time. I didn't know about any of this until I was much older, and I think that's why my dad left her something in the will. 2. Yes, my dad did get a DNA for Amy and Ken. He's not their dad. 3. I didn't say what I did with Amy and Ken around. That was strictly between their mom and me. Unless I was on speakerphone and she didn't tell me. 4. No, my dad didn't pay for Amy and Ken's college expenses. He would still get them the occasional gift for birthdays and Christmas, but after they turned 18, he stopped because he wanted me to have as many resources as possible. Not the a-hole. Your stepmother reaps what she sowed. I do feel empathy for Amy and Ken, but fortunately your dad didn't cut them off completely, so they shouldn't expect anything more from your dad's estate. I say go no contact with all 3 of them, and go live your best life, Opie, as your dad would have wanted. Oh, trust me, I am. I have no reason to speak to my ex-stepmom, and I'll only ever see Amy and Ken around my aunt's house and she still wants a relationship. But other than that, I'm good. They weren't very nice when I was growing up. Oh man, all of that was toxic as hell from the beginning to the end. I feel really bad for Amy and Ken, who did nothing to warrant their father figure's neglect. You don't seem to have a lot of empathy for them either, and I really hope you reflect and try to see their perspective. You're not obliged to split things equally. Your dad left it to you. I do hope you take this opportunity to remove yourself from a toxic situation, reflect on it, and move on. Nothing about what happened was okay. Try not to let your father's battle become your own. Honestly, he is arguably worse than your stepmom, because his choices hurt 2 innocent children. She's no saint, but he should have just left right from the start. You, Ken, and Amy are not the a-hole. Lol, do you realize they took their anger out on Opie? Opie was innocent too. This was the fault of the woman who didn't want to divorce her husband when he asked for one over her own entitlement to a relationship. Opie's father might have heard the kids had the parents got divorced, but not more than neglecting them for so long when the parents actually stayed in marriage. The ex-stepmom in this case cheated on her husband at least 2 times, failed to tell him that he was the biological father of kids, deceived him into raising someone else's kids for years. Then when he eventually found out due to his supposed son's illness and spiraled, manipulated, begged, and guilted him into a marriage he clearly didn't want, and let her kids be miserable. How the hell do you excuse that? The man made his intentions of not staying in a relationship very clear, but the ex-stepmom pushed it till it broke spectacularly. I see that Opie's father might have acted like an a-hole, but he was put into this very glorious position time and time again. So, if we really analyze the whole situation, no one is the a-hole here except for stepmom, and in some parts the dad, who by the way still left $20,000 to both of those kids he resented. Now for the next story. Am I the a-hole for not helping my biological parents? I, 22 female, was adopted by wonderful parents. I grew up as an only child and am very close with my adoptive mother and father. I have always wondered why my biological parents gave me up for adoption. I never asked and don't plan on it. But when I turned 18, my parents asked if I wanted to know who my biological parents were, and they told me their names and where they live. I looked them up in social media and contacted my biological mother. She was very happy to hear from me and asked if I wanted to meet. They lived about 4 hours away. I took the time off of work and drove the 4 hours. We hugged and they were very thrilled to meet me. I told them that I had finished up college and working as a hairdresser. They quickly changed the subject and asked if I could lend them around $2,000 to pay off some debt. I was speechless and asked if that was the main reason they wanted to meet. My dad said, "Kind of, yeah. We need help with some finances." I got up and left the diner. I drove the 4 hours back home and told my parents what happened. They were very supportive and let me know that they loved me. My biological mother has been blowing up my phone wanting to talk, along with some money requests. I've denied every one of them and told them I no longer want to talk to them. Then biological dad reached out and called me a horrible daughter for hurting my mother's feelings. I've not heard from them since the last message. Am I the a-hole for not helping my biological parents? Not stay home. You owe them nothing. Children should never be responsible for their parents' debt. They only wanted money, not to get to know you. The greatest thing they ever did for you is giving you up. Children should never be responsible for their parents' debt, especially considering these aren't even her parents. They are strangers asking for a handout. Definitely not stay home. Not stay home. Can you imagine growing up with them? You got lucky. And look at it from the even broader side. They immediately showed their true colors. They could have also first built a relationship and then tried to pull this off. They'd probably steal her paychecks if she got a job as a teen and be begging for money throughout her adult life. They only cared about her money, not her. Bullet dodged. Not stay home. Not stay home. They were horrible parents and you owe them nothing. Block their numbers and forget about them. I can guarantee if you've been homeless and penniless, they wouldn't have bothered with you. Oh, they would bother. They would ask her social security number and a couple of other questions. Last story is titled, Am I the a-hole for refusing to make my son apologize to my mother-in-law's goddaughter and undermining my husband's parenting? My mother-in-law's goddaughter, Amy, is not a nice person, but I'm the only one who seems to see it. So when I walked in on my 4-year-old son close to tears and being pressured by his dad to apologize to her for being rude, I immediately intervened. My son insisted Amy had said something mean to him, but she tried to make it look like my son misunderstood and was overreacting. From past experience, I knew she was lying. My husband kept insisting my son needed to apologize, but instead I told my son I believed him and that he didn't need to apologize. My son said, "But Daddy said I have to," and I replied to tell him that he still didn't have to. I asked him to go pick a book for bedtime, even though my husband kept protesting and insisting he couldn't leave until he said sorry. After we put our son to bed, my husband had a huge argument with me. I kept saying I was undermining his parenting and teaching our son that he could get away with not listening to his dad. He insisted our son was being rude, and that was unacceptable, and that I was blinded by my dislike of Amy. I replied by telling him that he was the blind one. He also blamed me for our son asking if his dad didn't love him anymore. Am I the a-hole? Edit. Amy's 32. She told my son his dad would send him and me far away soon because he was annoying. My husband wasn't there when this happened. He interrupted them earlier while they were working to ask his dad to play with him, and Amy was upset that my husband actually did. I believe him, because when we first got married, she would say similar things to me. My son yelled that she was a liar, which is what my husband thought was rude. I'm sorry, but what the hell is a 32-year-old grown woman doing picking on a 4-year-old and reducing him to tears? And why is your husband allowing this? I'm going to say not the a-hole based on that alone. Like, Jesus, the kid is 4. If he says Amy's a liar and said something that he perceived to be mean, he's likely telling the truth. At that age, they don't usually make up malicious lies about adults. Exactly. He is a 4-year-old and didn't quite grasp that Daddy was working. I don't agree with undermining the other parent, but I also don't think Opie was the a-hole. If I was her, I'd be asking her husband why he's okay with a 32-year-old being mean and disrespectful to a young kid and his wife. He is undermining both his wife and child but not standing up to the goddaughter for awful behavior towards them. I also just want to add quick that the husband thinks that his 4-year-old is bullying a 32-year-old woman. Not stay home. Sounds like Amy has a thing for your husband and doesn't like her time with him to be interrupted. Exactly. This is why she said similar things to Opie earlier in her relationship with her husband. I just hope there isn't an affair happening here. Amy is 32. Not stay home. It's important for a child to learn that an adult isn't always right and a child isn't always wrong. Also, Amy and your husband both sound like people who just want to watch your son do as they say. It's sad, but many people are that way. But she straight up told her child he didn't have to do what his dad said. She completely undermined his parenting and authority. How is that right? She could have took her husband to the side and settled it together, and decided if he should apologize.